Board of Commissioners. We have 3 meetings this evening: an Open Space and Township Properties Committee meeting, a Grants and Community Development Committee meeting, and a Building and Planning Committee meeting. So before we start, please silence your cell phones. There's amplifying equipment available for those who are hearing impaired, and the room is also equipped with telecoil technology. And later, when the floor is open for public comment, we're going to take public comment from those of you who are in the room first. We'll then turn to those who are attending virtually. If you are speaking in the room, we're going to ask that you use this podium to my right, to your left, and introduce yourself before you start speaking. So with that, we're going to turn to our first committee meeting for this evening. That's the Open Space and Township Properties Committee. And I recognize its chair, Commissioner Churchill.
Thank you very much, President Sinai. We have one motion on the, or excuse me, we have one item on the Open Space and Township Properties. And what I want to do is put a motion on the floor, and then I think there may be a friendly amendment to it. And if that passes, then go to public comment and then go to board questions and approval. And I hope that that will save a little bit of time. So, where is this? I would like to put before the board approval of Rolling Hill Park Cottage lease termination and issuance of a request for proposals for future use. Do I have a second? Commissioner Grimes, thank you very much. And Commissioner Grimes, I believe that you have an amendment. Usually we allow public comment on this before amendments, but bear with me, I think we'll save some time.
Right. So thank you, Chairman Churchill. And indeed, I do have a friendly amendment. I'll explain it first, and then I'll explain it first. I am going to ask for a friendly amendment to remove the part that would require the township to issue a 180-day lease termination notice to the Lower Merion Conservancy. So if accepted, tonight's resolution would be to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approving issuance of an RFP for future use of the cottage without any issuance of a lease termination notice tonight in this resolution. So with that, I will make a friendly amendment to change your resolution, your motion, so it would be to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approving the issuance of an RFP for future use of the Rolling Hill Park Cottage.
Is there a second?
Second. He's offering it.
Well, it is a friendly amendment.
If you accept it as a friendly.
Then I would recognize it as a friendly amendment.
Okay.
Is there public discussion on this motion?
Public comment?
Yes, I'm sorry.
No, that's right.
Potato.
Thank you. My name's Maureen McGeehan. I'm the director of the Lower Merion Conservancy. The Conservancy is a member-supported nonprofit organization that conserves the local watershed, preserves historic architecture, and protects open space land. I'd like to summarize our report to the Board of Commissioners that we sent on Friday, and the request by commissioners at the last meeting for more information. Since 1998, the Conservancy has leased the cottage, investing $750,000 into its acquisition, renovation, and maintenance. Persistent utility outages, not the township's fault, forced the relocation of our administrative offices, though our programming at the cottage continues. Our current 2021 lease, which ends in 2029, shifted most maintenance responsibilities to the township. Despite this, the Conservancy has solely managed maintenance, keeping the cottage in good condition as noted by the township at the time of the lease signing. The cottage hosts preschool through high school, environmental education programs, community service opportunities, public events, and an artist in residence program. We have included details about this in our report. The Conservancy operates on site at least 15 hours per week. The Conservancy has secured $1 million in grants in partnership with the Township to support invasive species control, riparian restoration, stormwater improvements, tree canopy restoration, and environmental education that benefits Township residents. These are also detailed in our report. Above everything else, what we'd like for you to know is that we are sorry that this process has been challenging for both sides. We never intended it to be. The Township has always been our closest ally and partner. Our environmental and preservation goals have long been aligned with yours. We've always been thankful for the work that you do. The Conservancy feels that the cottage is our home. Our identity is deeply rooted there. The cottage coincides with the birth of our organization in the 1990s. The saving of it and its restoration was the first project our board and membership rallied around and continues to rally around. While we might work on our computers at the Barnes Administrative Building, cranking out grant proposals, publications, and reports, it's the cottage that is the true center of our work. It is our programmatic hub. The on-the-ground work we do, and we do a ton of it, and I'm sure you know about it, it takes a lot of hard work, a lot of schlepping of plant material, building of small-scale green stormwater components for Township residents, and keeping of environmental education and stream monitoring equipment for all seasons. We can't imagine being able to do our work without the cottage as our program center. So thank you for the friendly amendment. That's reassuring, and thank you for your time.
Is there any more public comment? Seeing none, Jody, is there anyone online?
No one has their hand raised.
Okay, so I would go to, Ernie, would you like to further enlighten us on this project?
Well,
Our movement?
This action was deferred from an earlier committee meeting.
Yes.
I think we've talked a couple times about it. It's a question the board has been interested in regular use at the cottage, regular presence at the cottage, and became concerned that perhaps there was not enough regular presence and use, which kind of brings us to this point as we've spent the last, I guess, 18 months now probably talking about a new and updated and revised lease again. But here we are at this point.
Great. Okay, thank you very much. Commissioner comments, questions? I won't ask twice.
Commissioner Kramer does.
Oh, I'm sorry. Commissioner Kramer.
I took a tour with Al Augustine and Commissioner Rossman this morning of the cottage, both outside and inside. And I did a lot of research into the history here. I would note that that I have an email from June of 2021, right before this current lease was entered into, which said that the property was in good condition and that Paul McElhaney and Al Augustine had inspected it and found it to be in good condition before we entered into this recent, into the 2021 contract. Township has done, according to Mr. Augustine, zero maintenance on this property since the Township took over responsibility for maintaining the property in the current lease. You know, the reality is that when I walked through this property, I don't see much of a potential for a better use of this property than the Conservancy is making of it. It has a wet basement, which makes it difficult to have people live in it. There is no proper kitchen. It would require a renovation because there's no stove and there's only a mini fridge in it. There is no full bathroom in the entire building. There's a powder room on the first floor. So if this were to be turned into some sort of residential use, it would require extensive renovations that several years ago were estimated at $130,000, and I'm sure it would be a lot more than that now. So, because it would require a kitchen renovation, bathroom renovation, and probably a lot of work in the basement to put in some type of a waterproofing system, and that doesn't come cheap either. The Conservancy has agreed to all the terms of the lease that we offered a couple of months ago, and they agreed to regular use of this property. And I do not think that it is appropriate for us as a board to do anything that would jeopardize the Conservancy's existing or potential future grants. And so I would not support putting out an RFP in order to see if there is another use that would then dispossess the Conservancy of this property.
Thank you. Any other commissioner comments, questions? Commissioner Grimes?
Sure. Thank you. And I had some comments to make, and then I'll respond to what Commissioner Kramer said. First of all, let me acknowledge, and I appreciate that Ms. McGeehan acknowledges already, that the Township is a significant supporter of the Conservancy, both in terms of funding and programming assistance. And many individual commissioners on this dais, if not all of us, are also supporters of the Conservancy. And I see nothing that we might do tonight that would change any of that. Instead, the focus tonight should be about what steps we as a board can take to ensure the best use of the Rolling Hill Cottage going forward, and how the cottage can be used as an asset to promote safety and activity within Rolling Hill Park in which it's situated. Recent conversations from the Township's end, when we were still attempting to negotiate a lease with the Conservancy, focused on how little a use of the cottage would be sufficient for purposes of continuing with the Conservancy. But I would argue that shouldn't be the focus of our discussions. The cottage is a great opportunity for a nonprofit, be it the Conservancy or another nonprofit organization, to enjoy a unique historic facility nearly rent-free in exchange for minimum maintenance and other obligations. We should acknowledge that there are other nonprofit groups within the Township that have a need for additional space. For some of them, Rolling Hill Cottage may well be a great fit. For example, it's well known that Gladwyne Fire Company has a shortage of affordable and well-located housing for their volunteer firefighters. The ability to live near the firehouse would be a terrific incentive for their recruiting efforts. Similarly, there are other nonprofits serving human needs and community goals that would benefit from low-cost space within a park. Under the current circumstances, it would be a shame to not even give those organizations an opportunity to respond to an RFP and demonstrate how they could use the cottage for the community's benefit. Let me take a minute to remind everyone why it's important to consider options for the cottage at this time. Since 2021, the cottage and its grounds have been used with less and less frequency since the Conservancy moved to the barns, and that is why their current lease included an out that allowed the Township to consider, specifically contemplated that the Township would consider other tenants. At Rolling Hill Park, crimes such as car break-ins, graffiti, and vandalism have been persistent problems, creating a need to increase activity and the presence of people near the parking lot and the cottage. Both the public and Township staff have noticed that the cottage appears disused and even abandoned at times. Residents and staff who frequent Rolling Hill Park regularly make this observation to me, and I understand that there are some people who feel differently on that point. But the fact is, as the ward commissioner, this is something that I have heard regularly, again, not just from staff, not just from residents, but also members of the Rolling Hill Master Planning group that we have going right now. Also, parts of the cottage have seen ill-maintained at times. In particular, there's been a hole in the front porch that was left exposed and in a very hazardous shape until our township manager directed the Conservancy in early June to make repairs. And even then, it took more than 2 months for that to be cordoned off. And I would note that as of today, the hole in the porch is still there. It's kind of hard to imagine children going up and down on that porch every day or several times a week with that condition existing, if that's happening. Also, the area around the cottage was overgrown this past spring and summer. The board has seen photos of the area in front of the cottage so choked with weeds and tall vegetation that it was virtually impossible to access the council ring and greenhouse for many months between May and September. Clearly, no school groups, camps, or residents could have used that valuable park space during that time. And I would note that I actually have slides keyed up of that, but for the sake of time, I'm going to ask everyone to remember, on the board, to remember those pictures which you've seen before, and spare me showing them at this point. All of this background brings me to the question for the board tonight. We're not asked to render final judgment on the Conservancy, and we are also not asking to give the Conservancy any sort of notice tonight. Rather, the relevant question tonight is this: is the current use of the cottage so satisfactory from the township's perspective that the township should not even issue an RFP and consider new proposals by the Conservancy and other local nonprofit organizations for the occupancy use and use of the cottage going forward? To me, that is the essential question tonight. I believe the RFP process can only benefit the township and our residents. We can take a fresh look at ideas for using the cottage submitted by the community organizations that are enthusiastic about an opportunity to share their visions. The Conservancy, again, should certainly be part of that process, and I hope that and expect they would take advantage. Well, I already talked about that I've removed the request to terminate, so I'll skip that part. Let me just close by commenting on Commissioner Gilda Kramer's comments. It is true that the cottage would take money to convert to residential use, or frankly, I think there'd be money that would be required for general upgrades. That is a reason why we've had, I believe, $125,000 in our capital budget for 3 years now, and is in the capital budget for proposed capital budget for next year as well, to help whoever would continue at the cottage do the renovations. And I would expect if it costs more than that, then the bidder would be asked to front some of that. I would note also that some of the renovations that you talk about are deficiencies in the cottage now, and depending on who went in there, could either continue or not continue, but certainly as they don't prevent the Conservancy's use, I would expect that they wouldn't necessarily prevent use by another party. And finally, in terms of a lease, it is true that there was a lease that was offer that was put out there. This board did not accept the lease. This board was given copies of the lease, I believe, before we started this process, and it's never been accepted by the board. So depending on how and I could discuss, but I mercifully won't, what the issues were in my mind with that lease in its final form. But again, the township has options tonight, which are to issue an RFP, look at ideas with the Conservancy and others, and then make a decision for going forward, or don't issue an RFP and continue with the current arrangement, which I would expect would result in current conditions continuing. I think, again, the better and really low-cost option in terms of any party is to move forward and consider and see what else is out there so we can make sure we're getting the best use of the cottage. So thank you.
Other commissioner comments? Yes, Commissioner
Thank you very much,
Greenstein.
Commissioner Churchill. Yeah, this is Commissioner Bernheim. I have a question, and maybe Commissioner Grimes, you can answer it, since you made a motion to amend the 180-day lease termination notice. One, the lease that Commissioner Kramer circulated to us later this afternoon, I didn't get a chance to look at, and multitasking. I was more listening to you than reading, but doing both. And it states the initial term of the lease shall be 15 years commencing the first day of May 2014. That 15 years isn't up. So that's question one. Then it goes on, and that's in paragraph 1, that you have if you're going to give notice, it's got to be 180 days. And then paragraph 14 provides that if there's a default, there's got to be 180 days and an opportunity to cure. So when our issue briefing and what we received was on the table for us today, similar to before, included, approve issuance of a 180-day lease termination notice to Lower Merion Conservancy. Why are we changing that, and what am I missing in the lease? The lease term's up. It's got to be something I'm missing.
Well, let me try and answer, and then I'm going to the extent that I don't answer adequately, our manager might be able to weigh in. We redid the lease in 2021, and I believe that was a fully restated lease at that time. So I'm thinking, that you may not be looking at the latest version of the lease.
The version I have, and not to rudely interrupt, is August 20, 2021.
Right.
Okay.
So,
all right, and the term I read was, as read, 15 years from May 2014.
Okay. I mean, that I'm not arguing about the term, but
the term wouldn't be up. So what are we doing?
We have the right, if the township finds a new tenant, to give the conservancy notice and replace. That was done because at the time in 2021, we contemplated, as I think did the conservancy, that their use would be reduced at the cottage. And we agreed that if the township found a use that we considered better for the cottage, more suitable, that we could make a substitution. That is exactly what we're doing. Now, I have asked, and we have amended this motion tonight to remove any sort of 180-day notice, and I did that both to take the issue raised by Commissioner Kramer, the legal issue, off the table, and also because some commissioners told me they would feel more comfortable with proceeding without having given notice to the conservancy first.
All right, so what the lease provides in paragraph 14, either party may terminate this lease prior to its expiration by giving 180 days written notice to the other party. The reasons for termination are limited to the following. And it goes A through F. F is, if landlord finds a new tenant to replace current tenant, the landlord can terminate the lease by providing current tenant 90 days notice. Sitting here tonight, we don't have a new tenant. You can't issue 90-day notice for the tenant to leave so we can get an RFP out to find a new tenant. We would have to, I'm just reading the language. Well, that's what I thought your amendment was.
All we're discussing tonight is whether to issue an RFP.
Right.
This is the change that I put. In some respects, this is a friendly amendment that the board accepted. We are not doing anything with respect to moving to terminate the conservancy tonight. That's not being considered.
So, in other words, all you're seeking to do is put out an RFP to find a new tenant so that we then could exercise that provision at a later time and give the 180-day notices.
I would respectfully phrase it a little differently. I moved, where Commissioner Churchill moved, and I seconded, to issue an RFP to solicit responses from the Conservancy and any other interested local nonprofit, which the board can then evaluate and determine whether we want to take further action under the lease, with respect to future tenancy at the park. So I wouldn't discuss, as of now, Although certainly if we went to another nonprofit, by implication, we would terminate the Conservancy. But the issue for tonight is about soliciting ideas. It's not about terminating the Conservancy.
Yeah, you know.
And by the way, again, I'll
I'm just
make the
taking off my
offer.
commissioner hat and putting my lawyer hat on. I got a lot of problems with this, because the way the lease says, here, the termination of 180-day notice, and then here the limitations, and then F, which means you got to give the 180-day notice, then requires a 90-day notice.
Okay, but
You
that's
know,
not what we're doing
If I'm the tenant, or I'm representing the tenant, maybe some difficulty with doing what we're proposing here. Thank you.
I mean,
President Sino.
Thanks. I appreciate Commissioner Grimes' amendment, but I don't support the proposal for an RFP. A couple reasons. First is, in my view, I think the township's interest is in having a sufficiently active and beneficial to the township use of the cottage and grounds. I think we've made that clear from the beginning of this conversation. However, it need not be the best possible use. It needs to be just sufficiently good, in my view. And I think at this point, I am confident that Lower Merion Conservancy will be a good tenant, and if not, in the lease we have, the township has genuine recourse to move on from it in the proposed lease. The Conservancy is also a valuable partner for the township in many other ways. And I think an RFP, in the uncertainty that goes along with it, would have a unnecessarily negative effect on planning and use for that property. The second reason is I think that the lease, I feel like we presented a lease to the Conservancy that I thought addressed our stated concerns about the frequency and type of use, and they have agreed to it. I presented that in good faith. Personally, I do think that lease addresses the concerns that have been raised among us. To be clear, I never represented to the Conservancy that the board agreed with that lease, right? So the board is not at all implicated by my view, right? It was stated my personal view. I personally would stand by it. Let me add that I appreciate Maureen's words about the process. For me, the township and the Conservancy's longstanding partnership resonates with me much more than any hiccups that we had along the way to getting to this. I look forward to the continued relationship. Anyway, thank you, Commissioner Churchill.
Dr. Rossman, did you have your hand up? No? Any other commissioner comments, concerns? Yes, Commissioner Woolring.
Well, okay. Just two quick questions, one for our township manager and one for actually Commissioner Bernheim. The first being, issuing an RFP, really just for gathering information at this point, right? Doesn't mean we have to actually act on any of the given proposals, is that correct? Right. So, Commissioner Bernheim, a quick question about your interpretation of that part of the lease. Issuing an RFP just for information gathering be in violation of the lease?
Well, the last thing I'm going to do is play township solicitor. But I would tell you that I could fashion an argument if I were representing the tenant, just hypothetically, where I would be questioning the good faith basis of it. We have a lease that has a 15-year provision, which isn't up. We're not declaring them in default, and then we're hunting out a new tenant. I don't know that that's something that as a township we really want to do for all the reasons that President Sinai just outlined. But I'm not about to say, yes, is that technically a violation of the lease or not. But I think that the tenant might be a little bit disappointed in the manner in which we exercise our good faith if they're not in default.
Ernie,
right.
Could you comment on that?
So that was a non-answer, just in case.
That's fair. That's totally fair.
Well, I too won't give you a legal answer, but the board always has the right to accept or reject any RFP. So whether you choose to act on one or not is always within your full authority.
Okay. Well then, I'm all for information gathering. However, I don't see a use as of now that would be more beneficial than what the Conservancy offers. So that's my viewpoint.
Questions before I recognize Commissioner Grimes? I'm sorry, Commissioner Gavin.
Thank you. I've struggled with this a lot over the past year or so. When the Conservancy first moved to the barns, I was under the impression they're saying, okay, this cottage didn't work for them, moving to a different place, and yeah, it makes sense to have this new lease and to have an opportunity to find a use for the cottage that, otherwise wouldn't be used. And I really appreciate the comments tonight, the comments in the memorandum, and everything we've heard over the past few weeks, that there truly is a use by the Conservancy of this cottage. That's not what I had expected coming into this process. I really thought it was going to be used occasionally, and it is helpful to hear from me that there really is a strong usage of the cottage. And I think Commissioner Grimes asked the right question of, is the use of the cottage satisfactory that we should not do the RFP? I think that's absolutely the right question. I just have a different conclusion to that question. And I think, from what I've seen, it's not, and I've heard this from a couple of my colleagues up here, it's not a question of, is this the best usage? Are there other possible usages? Is this a good usage of the cottage? And from everything I've read, everything I've heard, everything I've seen, I think it is a good use. And if we have a tenant which is incredibly valuable to the township, which we do, if we have a use that is beneficial to our township, to our schools, to our residents, there's no reason to go out and find other uses or other potential uses. And while I fully recognize the potential benefit of going to an RFP and looking for other uses, when you have a tenant that we have in a township property, whether it's this, whether it's other township properties with other nonprofits, which we have throughout the township, I don't think we go out and say, let's go see if we have a better use for this property or that property or another property. We say there is a good use, it's serving the township, and we're happy with it. The question is, do we have that here? And I believe we do. And from everything I've seen, believe we do. I think we have had a breakdown of communication, of working together, of strategic partnership over the past however many months throughout this process, and I think that's been a real shame. And I'm confident that the relationship between this township and the Conservancy can be repaired, the two organizations can work together to say, here's what we need out of the cottage, here's the repairs we need to make, here's the support that we need to provide to the Conservancy to make that happen. I am hopeful and I'm confident that we can restore that. And I think with that said, if we can't, we can certainly do an RFP at a later time. But I believe we can, and therefore I can't support this because I do think there is a use of the cottage, a good use of the cottage, and one that should continue. Thank you.
Any other commissioners before that hasn't spoken? Seeing none. Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Rick.
Commissioner Whalen.
So just very briefly, I will be voting to support Commissioner Grimes. I think he's done exemplary work here over years. I think the rest of us have jumped in at the last minute after hearing reports and bits and pieces over time, and what we've heard tonight and at the last meeting frankly flies in the face of all of the documented history of this over the last few years that staff has told us about and Ernie has told us about. So I understand there's a fluidity here that people feel, but I feel like we've been presented evidence before, photographic and testimonial from again, people who've been there, staff over years, Josh, the extended period of time he's there. If there are legal questions or concerns, I think that the appropriate thing to do is to get our township solicitor's response to it. I mean, I'm not going to weigh in or play township solicitor myself. If there are questions or concerns that we have for Gil, I think those absolutely should go to Gil, and that we would follow whatever his opinion is. So I fully support Josh in this endeavor, and I understand that others have declined to do so going forward. but I would hope that we support him on the board.
Any other commissioner who hasn't spoken? Seeing none, I would recognize Commissioner Grimes.
Oh, no. I'm okay. Thank you.
You're okay? Okay. Then we will proceed with the vote, and I would just read out what the motion is on the floor. Approval of Rolling Hill Park Cottage, issuance of a request for proposals for future use. All those in favor,
If I
raise...
make point of order, it's recommendation to the board. This is at committee level.
You're right. You're always right. Thank you.
Let's not get carried away.
Oh, come on. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. All all those opposed?
Motion fails.
Motion fails.
6-7.
6-7. And that concludes the business of the Open Space and Township Committee, Properties Committee.
Thank you, Commissioner Churchill. Our next committee meeting for this evening is the Grants and Community Development Committee, and I recognize its chair, Commissioner Epstein.
Thank you. There are 3 items on this evening's agenda. Go ahead and get started. The first one, I'm making a motion to recommend to the Board of Commissioners adoption of a resolution to amend the housing rehabilitation program requirements to expand direct grants to cover the cost of environmental testing and abatement for lead, asbestos, mold, and radon. Do I have a second? Thank you, Commissioner Woodring. And Emily Crane is going to give us an explanation. Thanks, Emily.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Epstein. Good evening, everyone. As you mentioned, this is a request to approve amendments to the housing rehabilitation regulations. The program regulations, excuse me. Changes were made to the regulations last year for the first time in many years, you may remember, and we have an additional request, amendment request. The township regulations have always treated the funding of lead testing and abatement a little differently than the rest of the funding that goes along with the housing rehabilitation. The funding is not limited the way the rehab funding is, and it is not liened, so it's treated as a direct grant. It's not part of the lien. HUD has very specific rules about lead work and where it needs to happen and when it needs to, how much money you're spending, interior, exterior, is very specifically laid out through HUD. And the lead work is also very expensive. It often includes relocating residents while the work is being done, and the work itself is very expensive. So it is something that is potentially scary to residents if that were to be liened, which it's not. That would be very scary to them about how the money would pile up. And all of this is in our regulations. And, you know, we make our own regulations about this. You can lien lead or you cannot. You can lien rehab, you cannot. And that's the way we've done it. We lien all the other work we do, but not the lead. The treatment of the funding for other environmental hazards is not spelled out in the regulations, although it has been treated similarly in the past. In the middle of a rehab, if there are materials that present themselves that are going to be worked on that look like they might have asbestos, we test for that and abate if necessary. Less common is mold. Occasionally we test and abate mold. It's not as common. For both of those things, we also sometimes have to relocate residents. So we have been, it is not spelled out in the regulations, but we have treated that similarly to lead and not liened it. So we need to make that change. And the reason this came up is that HUD recently made a new regulation that we have to test for radon in every house that we work on, regardless if there's any, if somebody thinks there's a problem, we have to test every house. And if there is a problem, there needs to be a radon system that goes in to abate that problem. So this raised the question of how to treat the funding for the radon. And after discussion and review, staff is proposing to change the wording in several places in the regulations from lead hazard to environmental hazard, and to spell out that that includes lead, asbestos, mold, and radon, and to treat all of that funding similarly to lead as direct grants and not have it be liened. This will certainly reduce residents' fear of the spiraling costs due to environmental hazards, which will in turn reduce the presence of these environmental hazards in the township now and in the future. and keep the permanent liens to as low as we can for the residents that are involved in the program. And that is the proposal.
Thank you. Do we have any public comment? Any on Zoom?
No one has their hand raised.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments from the committee? We all agree we don't like radon? Okay, I love it. I'm glad we could align finally. Okay, let's call the vote. All those in favor of the motion? That passes unanimously. Also asbestos, unpopular. Great. Okay. Thank you, Emily. Item number 2. I'm making a motion to recommend to the Board of Commissioners acceptance of $2 million in additional county funding and a request to set aside 4 units in Ardmore House 2 for elderly adults experiencing housing insecurity, referred by Montgomery County's Your Way Home program. Do I have a second? Thank you, Commissioner Kramer. Charlie Doyle is here to give us an explanation. Thank you, Charlie.
Thank you very much. If you want to just give me a second here, I can pull up the
I know I'm quick, right?
brief slides, yes.
I know, I'm fast. Keep you on your toes. Bring us together.
Okay, thank you for your patience. So there's 2 matters that we have. The following matter, I just wanted to present kind of both of them because they're very interrelated. If you remember, early in 2020, or late in 2023, early 24, the board was motioning to get into a partnership with HUMANGOOD East. At that time, there was some paperwork that you guys had approved, and some of those documents included the funding that was provided through the county. Since that time, the project was initially provided $3 million from the county. The county was graceful enough to provide us with another $2 million for the project. So in order for us to accept that and then transfer that over to HUMANGOOD East, we would need to review these 2 documents that are presented to you this evening. So again, just to give you an idea, the established funding for this project previously was the $3 million from Montgomery County, $1 million from Lower Merion American Rescue Plan Fund, and then another $700,000 from the Affordable Housing Fund. And then altogether with this project, HUMANGOOD East was, after all the work that was done through 2024, HUMANGOOD East was awarded with the township the $13.2 million from the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency. So just to give you a brief idea of how the funding breaks down for this project, its total is $19.9 million. There are no local tax dollars that are going to fund this project. Again, there's $700,000 from the Affordable Housing Fund, another $1 million from the ARP funds from the township, $5 million total from Montgomery County, and then $13.2 from Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency. So again, tonight we'll be asking for consideration for the grant agreement that reflects the additional funds and that partnership with HUMANGOOD East, as well as allocating the $6.7 million now to the HUMANGOOD East team. That's all I got.
That's all you got? Okay. Just making sure. All right. Is there anyone who would like to provide public comment? This item, no, then I feel like it's going to be a no on Zoom.
Yes,
okay.
no one has their hand raised. Thank you.
I'm going to go first. Y'all do that. We did receive public comment through email on some of the Ardmore House 2 project concerns, and I just wanted to make the point that I know I read them. I think we all read them. This is a very fantastic, important thing we can do in a township. It doesn't mean we can't be mindful moving forward, and I don't think there was nothing in any of those emails that felt like a stopping point. It just felt like considerations that I think we can keep in mind moving forward and prioritize as we go. But I think this is a really exciting project. Any other comments or questions from the committee? Yes, Mr. Stevenson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to say that I just want to thank staff and working with our partners on accommodating the situation and allocating the money. I think it's important to stress that as you had said, about the source of funding and how we are using this in a prudent way, in a helpful way. I know we'll have more discussions about this in your later presentation, but I just wanted to acknowledge the work that is done to secure the funding. Thank you.
Mr. Zella.
Thank you. I want to thank very much Montgomery County for adding significantly to their prior contribution with their ARP funds. And this is significant progress in an initiative that adds more affordable housing in Lower Merion Township. It's a complicated and slow process, but we're doing something that I believe no other municipality in the county is doing. We have tremendous staff work, we have great partners, and this is significant. So, thank you.
Mr. Kramer.
I also would like to echo Commissioner Zeloff's thanks to the Montgomery County and particularly to the Montgomery County Commissioners, Jamila Winder and Neil Makija, who were personally involved in getting us the additional $2 million that we are voting on tonight.
Is there anyone else with first comment? Mr. Zella.
I would just like to add that the vote of the Montgomery County Commissioners was unanimous, and Commissioner Tom DeBello was also supportive.
I didn't say it, but I thank all of them too. Okay, any other comments? Let's call the vote. All those in favor? Oh, yeah, raise your hands. All those in favor. All right, unanimous. Okay, we're doing well. Item number 3, motion to recommend to the Board of Commissioners authorization of a grant agreement with HUMANGOOD East for Ardmore House 2, Senior Affordable Housing Project, conveying funds totaling $6.7 million. Do I have a second? Thank you, Commissioner Whalen. Did you want to add anything, Charlie? We're good.
No.
Okay.
No.
Just checking. Just checking. Any public comment? I'm on a roll. Okay. No one's on Zoom? No one's on Zoom.
There are people on Zoom, but no
one
one
has their hands up. Okay. Questions or comments from the committee? I love this. Let's call the vote. So all those in favor, raise your hand. That is unanimous. Thank you very much. That concludes the business of Grants Community Development. 3 for 3. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Epstein. And our last committee for this evening is the Building and Planning Committee. I recognize its chair, Commissioner Grimes.
Thank you. So we have 4 items tonight. The first 2 are going to cause me to label tonight's meeting the Linden Hill Committee night, since no one gets that, but because the escrow arrangement and the next item are both with the same property. The first is the escrow release. There's just one. That's to move to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval to release funds held in escrow as improvement guarantees in accordance with Section 135-7 of the Township Code for the following: 1543 Monk Road Sewer Project, escrow release number 2 for $27,500. Thank you, Commissioner Gavin, for the second. Any commissioner questions, comments? Any public comment on this one?
No one has
All
their
right,
hand.
seeing none, all those in favor, raise your hands signifying aye. Thank you. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. The next one on page 5 of the agenda is the second stage plan for 1533 Monk Road. And just to get the ball rolling, I am going to move to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval of a second stage plan. The plan shows the construction of a 7,853 square foot footprint, 2-story single-family dwelling with attached 2-car garage, attached 2-car garage, pool, greenhouse, and terrace gardens, and stormwater management system. 445,722 square foot parcel currently unimproved and created with the approval of the open space preliminary subdivision plan for 1543 Monk Road and 1420 Rose Glen Road, formerly Birch property in Gladwyne. And there are 2 amendments to the conditions of approval. which, I don't, does every commissioner have these?
Yes.
Okay, good. So as presented to the board, so that is my motion. Is there a second? Thank you, Vice President Kramer. So Chris, why don't you go ahead?
Many commissioners are familiar with this property. This is part of the Birch Dorrance estate that was subdivided a couple years ago. Just to remind the board, this is a 70-acre property. And in many communities, and even in this community, a 70-acre property could be divided into a lot of parcels. The outcome of this was really to the township's advantage. You took 70 acres, you converted it into 5 lots, you have 4 new owners, and you're going to have 2 new houses out of that whole thing. And what you're seeing tonight is one of those new houses. Second stage plan is required to make sure that this new house is environmentally sited properly on the parcel. One of the things that comes out of the township's respect for open space is to make sure that new homes are sited to reduce impacts to some of the large existing trees. It gives us the ability to move things around. It's kind of a sketch plan type idea. So what you're going to see tonight is this new house. It's on an over 10-acre lot. It's accessed off of Monk Road, and it's set way back. The driveway has been located to be a curving driveway to work with the natural slopes, to avoid disturbance to natural features, the slopes, and existing trees. There are several trees that need to be removed to accommodate the new home, but those have been minimized to the greatest extent feasible as part of that. So this is a very large house. It's 7,800 square foot footprint. It's on a 10-acre lot. It has a 2-car garage. It has other things like a pool and a large stormwater management facility. Currently, this property doesn't have stormwater management. It will now with the new home. Here's just a rendering of the proposed house coming in. You really won't be able to see much of this from the street. Monk Road slopes down away. There's several large trees between here and there, but this is a bird's eye view of what this new house will look like. Just some elevations. Part of this approval process, this is part of a Class 1 resource. That even though this is a vacant lot, this is being treated as a Class 1 resource. It has preservation area around it. This is area that can't be disturbed, that needs to be permanently protected. And then in addition, this parcel has something called a restricted area. A restricted area was something that was imposed by the Board of Commissioners along the Monk Road frontage to act as an additional view shed. And one of the conditions of that restricted area was that any new improvements that would come in with associated with a single-family home could be reviewed for their appropriateness by the Historic Commission. So the Historical Commission reviewed the plans for the landscaping up front, the walls, some deer fencing. The commissioners saw that last August, I believe. So that came forward. But that's all been rolled into this approval. Here's just some examples of the deer fencing that's being proposed. As you can see, there's just poles that'll be here. Many of these are set far back from the road, and the mesh is designed to be as unobtrusive as possible that you can just see through. But with that, we've had conversations with the applicant. He's agreeable to these conditions, and we'd like to introduce these 2 new conditions. The first is a new condition that the visual impact of the new stone walls, stone piers, and deer fence in the restricted area shall be minimized to the greatest extent feasible. This is consistent with the spirit of the restricted area that was imposed by the Board of Commissioners. And then revising condition number 24, the Planning Commission had added a phrase to the maximum extent practical. We would like that to be removed, and just to go back to that, the applicant shall redesign BMP number 1 drive subsurface infiltration bed to be outside the restricted area. What we had noticed was when this was being reviewed, that there's a large stormwater management facility. It encroached into that restricted area. We asked the applicant, could you look at this, and the applicant's engineer, could you look at this? And there were some concerns with just some of the borings and some of the percolation. In the meantime, since the Planning Commission, they've looked at that, they said they can completely relocate that, so that those amendments from the Planning Commission are no longer necessary. The original condition can go, so there won't be any encroachment from that. Staff recommends approval with the conditions. I'm happy to answer any of your questions.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have questions for Chris or comment? Go ahead, Commissioner Zello.
Just to clarify, did you say, Chris, that the applicant does accept the
Correct.
2 amendments to conditions?
That's correct.
Okay. I guess in comments, this is a remarkable site. And as you pointed out, only 2 new houses are going to be built on this large parcel. And second stage plan gives us a chance to look at them, and we've already done that for the first property.
After this, we're all done. This, I think we're finally putting a bow on this subdivision.
When did we do that?
Months ago.
Second stage plan for the
other one?
For the
we did
first,
that a couple
second
months ago.
stage plan?
Yeah, it was several.
The first house to be built.
For the other property was
Correct.
several months ago. Yeah.
Several months ago, but I can't, it's not, it hasn't broken ground yet. They're finalizing all the permits.
I think it was September.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Let me just add on the context. With respect to condition number 2, when we discussed this property, for those who may or may not have been on the board at that time, it was very important to the community and I think to this board that this property, which is a Class 1 resource, remain as undisturbed as possible, at least from Monk Road. And hence condition number 2, the purchaser of the property, the new owner, was not part of that negotiation and is putting some relatively sensitive, relatively unobtrusive improvements, a stone wall and some fencing into the restricted area. But after talking to them today, I'm confident that they understand and respect and are sensitive to the need to change this property, at least in the restricted area, as little as possible. And I'm pleased and just want to recognize that the township asked for this new condition number 2, and the owner did not hesitate to accept it, and the people who work with him, and I just want to recognize that he's doing this the right way. So is there any public comment on this? Or any, I'm sorry, a public comment in person? Seeing none, anyone? Okay, so we'll call the vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand signifying aye. Okay, thank you. Any opposed? And seeing none, any abstentions? Okay, the motion carries. The next is tentative sketch plan for 55 Ardmore Avenue. That's on page 26 of the agendas. I'm sorry? What's the matter? Good. Oh.
Commissioner Gavin was wondering if Commissioner Courtney was on the screen, but his
Oh, I didn't see him.
His camera's turned off.
Oh. Maybe he wanted to come on just to endorse that last item. I hope. Mr. Doyle, do you care to?
Hopefully, we're having a little deja vu about Ardmore House 2. This is the second portion of the Ardmore House. The existing property is actually right outside of this blue area here. You'll see the property is straddled between School Lane and Ardmore Avenue, and it's currently a public parking lot. Tonight, we'll be looking at the recommendation for the construction of a single 4-story building with 48 units targeted for low-income seniors, age 62 and older. There's 48 units. Each one includes 1 bedroom and 1 bathroom. The units are reserved for different spectrum of the area median income, meaning that the level that's required for subsidy differs between the units. The unit breakdown is 3 units at 20%, 6 units at 40%, 20 units at 50%, and 19 at 60% of the area median income. These properties, 6 of them are ADA units, and 2 are designed for hearing and vision impaired. There are 42 parking spaces that are provided, where 26 are required. This property complies with the low-income housing requirements at half a lot within a half a mile from a public transportation system, being this Septon Ardmore line. So here's the layout of the property. You'll notice again, kind of centered around the existing Ardmore house, the 62-unit senior housing development. The proposed building is just to the south of that. The entrance for the property will actually be on the east side. You'll notice there's some hashing going on around the entrance there. That's just for decorative, kind of coming into an inviting location along the property there. And you'll also see the entrance is highlighted there in yellow. There's parking that's provided along the eastern portion there of the property. And the southern portion, those are actually existing. Much of that is existing parking that is provided right now by the Lot 3 that is the township parking. There's some residential homes to both the southeast corner and then directly south. Directly south to the property is also the township lot for that John Henry's lot. That's quickly named. So the breakdown of the units here, there's a total of 6 units on the first floor. You'll notice that as you walk in, there's a lobby area, and then you'll be greeted through a community room. There is the elevator system, then greeting you before you would get into the units there. That's the first floor. The remaining 3 floors all have 14 units. Again, they're 1 bedroom and 1 bathroom. So going to the elevations here that were provided with the plans, this is the entrance of the building itself, coming right off of Ardmore Avenue. Here's a view of the proposed building along School Lane. You'll notice there's a retaining wall. Actually, 3 sides of this property are bound by retaining walls. The only one not being that is to the north, where Ardmore House exists. So part of this process, prior to Planning Commission reviewing the plan, the township staff thought it would be pertinent to talk to the community. On November 11th, the township held meetings at both Ardmore House and the Palm Center. There were representatives from the township there. Some commissioners came out. HUMANGOOD East, which is our partner, along with Genesis Housing, CBP architects who are part of the plan, representatives from Ardmore House, and then Gross and Quaid as well, who help manage the Ardmore House property. But we're all we're in contact with throughout this process as well. So we did obviously hear some comments and concerns, and wanted to make sure that as we go through this process, the tentative sketch plan process, that we address these as early and as quickly as possible. So obviously the biggest elephant in the room is taking away 98 parking spaces. No surprise, as coveted parking is in Ardmore. Additionally, School Lane itself seemed to be more problematic than the township and maybe had an understanding, because of the daycare and dance studio there being a nuisance, a lack of parking along School Lane, and creating that dangerous intersection there. As well as concerns about the construction timeline, externalities that would come from dust and noise and vibrations from construction. As well as how projects would be coordinated along Ardmore Avenue. And then finally, how the plan was actually designed. There was concern for the location of the emergency generator and transformer, and again, that the retaining walls and buffering around the property. So the next couple slides I wanted to provide to you were what was provided to our Planning Commission, so you get an idea of what the Planning Commission made the decision upon to recommend to you all tonight. And then I did want to follow up with a slide just giving you an idea of what we've done thus far since meeting with the community 1 month ago. So as opportunities came, we identified that the parking spaces would be removed. The township has been in works with the parking services as well as police to monitor parking needs throughout the township, and are currently working on a planning document that would address parking in Ardmore. There has been some previous research that was performed last March by our parking services that identified that this lot had about a 40% occupancy, which was the lowest in the Ardmore area. But regardless, the township will be working with the various departments, again, parking services, police, public works, to make sure that any traffic safety issues that are raised or concerned, we had spoken with them during this tentative sketch plan process. Another concern was the buffering around the southwest corner of the property, specifically due to its proximity to both utilities and infrastructure, as well as the parking that lines along the southern portion of the property. So we wanted to make sure that we had, while there is a 20-foot buffering and there would be 7-foot tree minimum size upon planning, that we would work with our consultants to ensure that the buffering and landscaping are created to the greatest extent feasible. So with that, the Planning Commission recommended last Monday to the conditions of approval and just modified condition 10 slightly to read that the township would work with neighbors, township parking services, police, and traffic safety to address concerns raised by residents. And they included prior to submission of the preliminary plan, including relocation or replacement of parking, traffic on-street parking issues along School Lane, as well as screening and noise from the location of transformer and backup generator. They included that. And then, again, this is prior to this preliminary plan. The township would meet with the Lower Merion Fire Department to review access to the property. So with that being said, since that time, since we met with the public a month ago, and since the recommendation of Planning Commission, we've taken steps within our various organizational departments to address some of the issues that are on School Lane. The operator of the Mikasita, I'm sorry, was given a violation notice for zoning because they weren't complying with the requirements of the loading and unloading of students safely to the property. So there has been a violation already, and as well as Township have met with parking services again, building and planning, our department, to look at some alternatives. One being the consideration of making School Lane a one-way street, which would then open up parking along the property or along the peripheral portions of the property, especially to the north side where parking is not provided currently, but does not have any driveway breaks. If you'll notice, you can slightly see in this picture here, the parking is on the right side there coming down School Lane towards Ardmore. That would then be adjusted so that there's no breaks and you could have parking. It would provide approximately 12 parking spaces that could be provided. Temporarily, consideration for parking of residents could be relocated to the property behind John Henry's, or we would look to provide some other alternatives to the residents there. So with that being said, asking for your recommendation again to the commission. So, thank you.
Thank you. Questions, comments? Commissioner Stevenson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Charlie, thank you for the presentation. I also want to thank the staff and thank the community for the input. These are ongoing conversations that we need to do in order to address some of those issues that brought forward. I know you outlined some of them. And so some of the questions that I'll have will be related to, for you and Chris, related to some of the things that you've addressed just for clarification. So first question I had, and Chris, this is for you, just for clarification. At the Planning Commission, one of the concerns was that the project didn't comply with minimum off-parking requirements. Can you just clarify that, please?
Sure. As Charlie mentioned in his presentation, and I've actually informed, we've had some email exchanges with some of the neighbors over the last few weeks. This particular use has its own parking requirement of half a space per unit. I can see, and it does comply, so I'm verifying that it complies. I can understand where, the way our code is written on, we pass ordinances, and sometimes when it gets on E-code, if a resident goes and looks at E-code, they look at the chart, and they assume that this would be under the multifamily requirements for parking. There's actually something in a text note a little bit further below that indicates that this particular use has its own particular parking standard. You just needed to read further down into that, but I am clarifying that it does comply with the minimum parking standards.
Great. The next question is that there was some concern that this property would have opportunities for turnkey, meaning that at some point a deed would allow the property manager to turn it over from this affordable housing to someone who might want to buy it for profit.
I think the easiest way to answer that is this is a township project, so we're the ones who are managing that, and we're the ones who are building those parameters with HUMANGOOD East. So I don't think that's really an issue.
Thank you. The next question is, and I apologize if you talked about it, Charlie, because I stepped out. There was a well-done suggestion around the generator and where the generator's original location was, and then we have in our plans for the emergency generator plans to move that into another spot that will be approved by a fire and stuff, right?
Yeah, and that's honestly what the purpose of tentative sketch is. So you have tentative sketch tonight, and this is kind of like a practice review. When we have large, complex developments, we bring them forward and we red flag them. And somebody, as they brought this forward, put the generator on the edge that's closest to a neighbor. That's not necessarily good planning, much like if this was another market rate multifamily development, staff would flag that as it comes back a preliminary plan. We'll move that closer or somewhere else on the site that's certainly not adjacent to a residential property and would be appropriately screened.
One of the neighbors brought up about the concern about sewage overload and how we're going to address that.
Yeah,
that
once
possibility.
again, that's a preliminary plan issue, and I think sometimes the issues with most of these projects that we get into are really preliminary plan issues. People really want to talk about landscaping, they want to talk about traffic. Tentative sketch is where we are today, is really just citing the building, letting everybody know that this project's coming in. You want to make sure the building and the driveways are located first before you fully engineer the parking lot, the sewer, the stormwater, all of those other fully engineered elements. That will be following up after tentative sketch. But Joe can also comment on that because he's familiar with the sewage capacity of Ardmore.
The sewer mains have the capacity to take additional sewage flows. And I think part of the concern was about the existing lateral connection from the property to the main and whether or not that has the capacity. This is another building. It'll have its own connection to the main, so it'll be designed in accordance with the current standard to have enough capacity for the flow for the building.
The other questions that I had, you had already outlined, and that is, I'm glad in what you put in there that one of the concerns about traffic in which we need to address for the neighbors and particularly the business on the other end. So I'm glad that you already outlined that and that we can use that as we follow up with the residents in January. Those are all the questions I have for now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Zelloff?
Thank you. Chris, I just want to clarify something that Commissioner Stevenson said. Township's not managing this project, and so it's an important distinction or description of our role. I'd like our manager to explain our role in this project.
Sure, Commissioner. We're a partner in the project. We own the land. We are not selling the land. We will continue to own the land even once the project is built, and we are a partner in the project. Our partner, HUMANGOOD East, is the one who will be managing the project, building it, and then ultimately turning it over to a nonprofit entity to manage, similar to the way Ardmore 1 is managed.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
Sure. President Sinai?
Thanks, Commissioner Grimes. Just a really quick question. I think I know the answer to it because I think Vice President Kramer has answered it. But the retaining wall that Charlie mentioned on 3 sides, is that just the existing retaining wall? We're not contemplating it getting bigger or changing in any way?
Correct, just the
Okay.
existing.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Grimes.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, I don't believe we have a motion on the table, so if someone would like to make one.
Commissioner Grimes, did you ask for public comment?
No, we don't have a motion yet. If no one wants to make a motion, we're done with this item.
Aren't you going to make the motion?
Well, I didn't make a motion.
Okay. Why aren't you making the motions this year?
It's on page 26.
Here, I move that we consider for recommendation of the Board of Commissioners approval of the tentative sketch plan. The plan shows Ardmore House 2, a 4-story building with 48 units reserved for low-income seniors, age 62 and plus. All 48 units will feature 1 bedroom, 1 bath. The development also includes a total of 42 parking spaces.
Thank you. And there's a second from Vice President Kramer. Okay, thank you. Is there any public comment on this matter? Please, ma'am, feel free to come up to the podium. If you could start by stating your name and the neighborhood you live in.
My name is Lori Daly, and I live at 29 School Lane. So I am the property that is immediately adjacent to this project. And I just want to start by mentioning that the Planning Commission meeting last week, we talked extensively about the generator and transformer. So I just want to say that wasn't noted in what Chris mentioned, and just want to make sure that's both the generator and the transformer. We talked about the relocation of that. The project manager was here and had talked about ideas and such. It didn't make it into the Planning Commission's recommendation. What made it in was the screening, I believe, and noise, but not the relocation. So I just wanted to, I was kind of concerned and confused why that didn't actually make it into the wording. Not sure if it matters, if that language matters, but I hope that relocation is a part of that. That's because that's essentially in my backyard. And then next thing I want to talk about is Chris mentioned that in response to Anthony's question about the compliance with the parking reduction in the zoning code. And Chris did email us about this, that he met with a zoning officer. Not sure if that's someone who's here. I'm not familiar with people, or if someone else is better to answer this. The reason given is that under 155.8, below that regular chart, which I did see in the wording, it says that as long as, so they can qualify for this 0.5 reduction from 1 to 1 for spots to unit if they are in compliance with 155-10.15. Because specifically under section B3, if you read down even further, it says, quote, any new structure on the adjacent property must be designed in a campus plan to reflect and facilitate common usage with buildings on the other property. So the problem with that is that last week, the project manager spoke at the Planning Commission meeting and specifically stated that these 2 buildings cannot have any common use areas. The reason being is that the existing Ardmore House Senior Living is a HUD subsidized property. And despite the township maintaining ownership of both properties, since they are and would be leased to different property management companies, and they have totally different types of funding sources with their own rules and requirements, that this would prohibit them from having any shared common space. So therefore, I still question the compliance with the parking reduction. The second reason was the deed having to be insured for low-income housing in perpetuity. Still questioning that as well, how that can, that is a part of it. Following up, if it does turn out that This is still somehow in compliance, though I'm not seeing how it is. But if it is, then it would seem that they only need 24 spots, since there's 48 units. I'm not sure why 26 is stated as required, but let's 24, 26. Could those remaining spots then be returned to the public if that is their only requirement? And the reason being is that the purpose of this parking reduction that they are compliant with, supposedly, is that they live close to SEPTA and they are low-income residents, meaning they are not going to have as many cars. They should not need all of those spaces. So that being said, I would like it to be considered that 18 or some number of those remaining spots of the 98 that we're losing could be returned to the public as part of this project.
Okay, ma'am, if you're able to wrap up your comments, please. We usually give about 3 minutes.
Sure.
Thank you.
I am speaking on behalf of my neighbors.
Okay.
No one else is here, so I don't know if that gives me some more time.
Well, I've already given you over 4 minutes, so I mean, I'm just, if you take another minute or so.
I'll try to wrap it up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Also, the talk of using the public lot behind John Henry's, which none of the businesses were aware of during construction. Not sure how that makes sense because it's full every day with permit holders already. Also, wondering about the notice that went out. Supposedly, Charlie said that 400 plus postcards were sent out to all residences and businesses within 500 feet. We have not found any businesses yet who received this postcard notice. Not even the little strip of stores right across the street who will lose all their parking as well. I know I'm a resident. Obviously, I have resident concerns, but I care about my business neighbors. I use 3 of those businesses up the street and 2 down the street. We have good relationships, lots of us, and I care about them. There's been so much concern with these businesses losing parking for them, their employees, their staff, their customers. I think they also need to be considered. And the reason maybe you're not hearing their voices is because none of them got notices. So I would like to request a list of those that were sent out. That's the end. Not so bad, right?
I'm sorry?
Not so bad, right?
No. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else with public comment tonight? Okay, is there anyone online?
There is. He just put his hand in. Nope, his hand is back up. I'm going to put Justin Brooks in. And he is coming up as a panelist momentarily. Mr. Brooks, if you could turn on your camera and your microphone. He's on there. Mr. Brooks, could you please turn on your camera and microphone?
Hi, I apologize. My camera's not functioning, I'm traveling, but are you able to hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Mr. Brooks.
Can you hear me? Okay, thank you. Yes, I just wanted to briefly speak.
If you could start by stating your name and the neighborhood you live in, please. And then go ahead.
Sure, my name is Justin Brooks. I'm at 19 School Lane, a few doors down from Miss Daly, on the same block as the project. And I wanted to reinforce her concerns. I don't need to go into the same kind of level of detail, but I did want to note that we have yet to be presented with all of the factual information to show that the zoning conditions are satisfied yet, and we are taking a look at that, the neighbors with a zoning specialist, but we look forward to seeing that this is deeded to be low-income housing in perpetuity, We certainly wouldn't want to see a bait and switch here. As it stands, the 8-row homes on this block are the affordable housing of the community. Um, and people are renting there for less than people are going to be renting in this new building. And it's somewhat ironic that this project is going to be burdening that affordable housing. The only other point that I wanted to note was that the the condition as recommended said that the applicant should be working with the neighbors as far as these potential solutions for parking. So we very much appreciate hearing from Mr. Leswig that this is in the works. However, we would like to continue to be updated as the project moves forward with any developments and what the potential solutions are, so that we may give feedback on that point. And that is all I have to say.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone else with any public comment? Okay, seeing none, is there anyone on the board who'd like to respond to public comment or make any other comments, ask any other questions? Vice President Kramer, please.
Yeah, I'll just reiterate that we are committed to working with the neighbors throughout this process, and I know that the staff has been very engaged and plans to continue to be engaged along with the Ardmore commissioners in addressing resident concerns so that this can be successful for everyone. I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you'd like to specifically address any of Mrs. Gilly, is that your right? Concerns that you hadn't already addressed, this is a great one of the times that you could, but I know that we'll be continuing to work to resolve your concerns going forward.
I think the biggest concerns being obviously the changing in parking that we've discussed earlier, the location of the generator and transfer, the backup generator and transformer at the location that's proposed. Again, these things, we flagged this immediately when we received the plans, but it is, some of these are they're incremental, right? So that we get a set, we give them our comments, they get it back. But by the time that goes to their, whatever architects or whoever's looking at these, and the engineers obviously as well, that they would need time to then kind of digest what we're recommending and see where they can put things. So as far as the location of all the utilities, we will make sure that obviously that's something we flagged right away that we weren't cool with. So, and then obviously the parking, we're obviously working to address that in a multitude of ways. And then obviously the issue with School Lane as well is something that we're looking at currently.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Stevenson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to, again, thank the stakeholders across the board. Number one, starting with this board of Commissioners. Over a year ago, when this was an idea and we started having conversations about that, the board has been supportive of the concept that slowly, even before we acquired grant money for it, and those conversations continued up until the grants were approved. So I appreciate the board continually pushing this issue around affordable housing. I also want to thank the staff for their input and the work behind this to make sure that we got to the point that we are over the last year. Also want to thank the members of the community, during this process when it started over a year ago, when it was mentioned about this, that it's overwhelming support for this. And at the same time, in any situation of development, there are issues that we have to address with residents and neighbors and businesses, and this is not unique. And through the community, first initial community meeting, a meeting I had with neighbors last night, tonight, and the continued leaving up to preliminary plan, we will continue to do the balance. The balance is that support this important project, but listen to those things in which we've already outlined, those concerns, and to come for common ground where people can have a balance of their quality of life, but still at the same time support this meaningful project. I stand by this project. I think it's a great project, and I appreciate everyone's input so far as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Just going down the lane, Commissioner Zeloff, why don't you go next?
Thank you. Charlie, before you sit down, there was a good question asked about providing notice to commercial property owners. Can you respond to that?
Yeah, so our system is that we use a system that was established for our permit process. It's called Tracer. I'm not sure if anybody's brought this, this concept to you guys, but we use it internally like all the time. Everybody that uses the permit processing system has to go in, put all the data in there. It's constantly updated. We have a repository and a Rolodex of all the addresses with what should be the current property owners or anyone occupying those properties. That gets updated by Tracer, who is a third party to us, backed up through the system that the county uses for their parcel information. I personally don't understand it much more than that information then goes into a database. The database is then queried for properties within whatever distance you would say for a buffer. Extracts that address and ownership information, and then creates a list so that we can then generate that from a computer and creates these postcards. There were a stack, like this big that went out when we sent them out for both the sketch plan process as well as the open house that we had as well.
Great. So, Charlie, if a business didn't get a postcard for some reason or couldn't make the meeting or has questions, where can they go to learn more about this project?
Certainly welcome to contact me, cdoyle@lowermerion.org. My number is 610-645-6117. I'm always available to speak with anybody during our hours and happy to meet outside of those if anybody has any concerns.
And can they go to the township website and find information?
Absolutely.
Okay. And Charlie, I know the answer, but we're going to treat this project as if it were privately funded in terms of the public process. It's going through tentative sketch, it's going through preliminary plan, that's to come. Commissioner Stevenson, in whose ward this is located, is extremely responsive to all community concerns and wants to make sure that all questions are asked and answered. And this is coming through actually at a very good time because we don't have a lot of private development of this scale in the township. And so this publicly funded project is going to be treated, as I said, just like privately funded, with a lot of opportunity for staff and commissioners to be responsive to public concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. President Sinai?
Thanks, Commissioner Grimes. Just a quick clarifying follow-up with Charlie. So you had mentioned that you were iterating on the transformer and the backup generator with the applicant. The iteration obviously isn't before us tonight, and that's because it's a preliminary plan issue, that the iteration's finished by the time we get to preliminary plan.
Absolutely. Okay. Those are conditions that are written into our conditions of approval that were provided.
Okay, and so I think it's an important clarification for people who don't live our process all the time, which is after this, there's another entire public hearing, which is public preliminary plan. And is there a second stage plan for this as well? No.
There would not be a second stage.
Plan. Okay,
no,
so
the preliminary would be where we look at things like where Joe gets involved with the stormwater and the circulation. And
okay, and so that's where all these things that have been raised should be resolved by preliminary plan, and that's when we see.
Absolutely.
Okay.
The next step, these should be ironed out to the best extent feasible.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Grimes.
Thank you. Anyone else? Comments? Okay. We will call the vote. All those in favor, raise your hands. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Carries unanimously. The last item on page 50 of the agendas is the Historic Commission. There is one item, and I am going to move to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval of the following application as recommended by the Historical Commission at their meeting held on November 16, 2024, 1115 Bryn Tidden Drive, Gladwyne, Class 2. Approval to renovate and enlarge a historic stone outbuilding at the rear of the primary residence, including a frame addition and new windows, doors, and roofing, citing Secretary of the Interior Standards 9 and 10. Is there a second? Thank you. Would any commissioners want any sort of presentation from staff on this? I'm seeing none. Any commissioners have any questions or comments on this application? Seeing none. Is there any public comment on this matter? No one present? Is there anyone online?
No one has their hand raised.
Okay. I will call the vote. All those in favor, raise your hand signifying aye. Commissioner Rossman, are you voting? Commissioner Dr. Rossman, are you voting? Oh, that's a yes? Okay, thank you. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the motion carries, and that concludes the business of building and planning.
Okay, thank you very much, Commissioner Grimes, and everyone. We are done for this evening. Have a good night.